Is it a cold or the flu? Should you take an antibiotic? These questions and more will be answered next on Being Well. Joining me this week is Dr. Sheila Simons, Professor of Health Studies at Eastern Illinois University. Dr. Simons' area of specialty is epidemiology, and she's going to give us some great information about the best ways to stay healthy during the cold and flu season. So don't go away. Thanks, Dr. Simons, for coming on Being Well. Let's get right into the topic today and give our viewers a description of what's the difference between bacteria and viruses.
Well, bacteria is much different than a virus. A bacteria is something that it can actually be treated with an antibiotic. It is very small in size. It does cause many of our infectious diseases. It is treatable. And it's also something that comes in a variety of different types of shapes. Whereas viruses are also very well defined. They're difficult to treat and impossible for an antibiotic to penetrate their outside or their exterior.
And where do they both come from? Certain places? I mean, we can get them in food, we can get them from person to person. Where do they come from?
Well, they come from a lot of different types of places, and those places we actually call reservoirs. And reservoirs are where these particular types of bacteria and viruses and other types of pathogens, which are disease-causing agents, live and develop. Some need humans to do that, some don't. Some can be in water, some can be in food, so there's lots of different places you can find it. The ones that we are affected by the most are actually either airborne or, more appropriately, they're what we consider to be a fomite. A fomite is an inanimate object such as a table or a doorknob, but not necessarily drinking fountains like many people believe they come from. The design of drinking fountains actually prevents these illnesses from happening because the water arcs, and it actually keeps people from developing these illnesses. Many of them are actually the result, or when people do get sick, because of poor hand hygiene. And that is really the thing we need to focus on.
So I know it's hard to say how long viruses or bacteria will live on a surface, but do you have some sense of, you know, if I blow my nose and don't wash my hands and then I touch a door handle, how long is that? If someone else comes along and touches that, can they catch that?
It's actually about 10 to 15 minutes that it will live on that surface. You know, many of our local grocery stores and discount stores actually use cart sanitizers where you can wipe down the cart. If the cart has been outside in one of the cart corrals, it's not necessary to use that. In fact, we have a tendency as a society to over-sanitize, and that is becoming a much larger issue for us because the over-sanitizing can actually lead us to bacteria that are antibiotic resistant, and it becomes more difficult for us to treat.
Okay, so let's talk about if you have a lot of people, depending on the time of the year, they get colds, they get flus, and I want to go to the doctor, I want to get rid of this, and they get mad if their doctor doesn't prescribe something. Talk about the treatment versus if you have a cold. Well, let's first talk about symptoms of cold versus flu. That might be a better place to start.
You know, symptoms of cold are very consistent as they are for flu. You know, when you get the flu, it's very quick. You start to feel the signs and symptoms very quickly versus the cold where you know that you have something come on. You know that maybe someone made you sick, or you know, we'll kind of blame that other person, or we'll say so-and-so made us sick, or I know where I got this from, because it takes a series of days to develop that. You usually feel like you can eat. You don't have any body aches or pains, but with influenza, it's very fast. You do get body aches, you do have a fever. You generally don't have nausea or vomiting or diarrhea, but you can develop things like, you know, that sensation that you don't want to eat and you just feel miserable. So there's a big difference between the two. With H1N1, which was really our big concern on this campus, and the reason why it was really the concern is the last time we had a H1N1 outbreak, it was during the Spanish influenza in the 1900s. So it's been quite some time, obviously. But the outbreak was so bad amongst individuals who were healthy that the average time frame in which people would live to age-wise dropped by 11 years. So the lifespan actually dropped. It was that bad. Wow. We had that many people that actually died from it. So we found that helping to prevent these illnesses is really the absolute best way to go. But with influenza, you're looking about 14 days to recover from that. If you're looking at a cold, 3 to 5 days for you to develop the illness, and then you'll recover within a week and a half. You may have some lingering signs and symptoms, but you will get past that. As opposed to allergies.
Yes, which is what I'm suffering from right now.
Yeah, and actually this year is going to be a terrible season for allergies. Our recent reports are showing us that because our winter wasn't as cold, we're going to have far more pollens, far more molds than what we've had in the past. So we have a whole new season in front of us in which allergy sufferers are going to be absolutely miserable. Now, on occasion, I have students that say that they have a cold, and the cold that they're talking about is something that they've had for weeks on end. Sometimes they'll say, I've had a cold the entire semester. That is not a cold. What that probably is allergies. And the thing that will cause you to recognize a difference between that is that when individuals have a cold, they usually have some form of colored mucus. Same thing with the flu.
Yeah.
When they have allergies, their mucus is clear. And it can be difficult sometimes to treat allergies because it takes a little bit of heads-upness to say, I need to start taking something now, as soon as you start to recognize those signs and symptoms. And there are quite a few things over the counter that people can use to treat that with, many of them that were prescriptions within the last 5 to 10 years.
So when you have an illness in either cold or flu and you go to the doctor and say, I want an antibiotic.
Yeah.
What is that for? Is that for cold or is that for flu?
Well, it's probably going to be for something that's bacterial, like strep throat. Strep throat is very big on college campuses, very big this time of year because people live together. It's so easily transmitted. And I just personally got over a case of viral pharyngitis, and pharyngitis is a really fancy word for sore throat. When people get the bacterial pharyngitis, that's the strep throat, and people who've had it in the past, they know that that's what it is.
That's the white spots on the back of your throat.
Precisely. They develop those white patches on the back of their throat. They almost always have their tonsils, but there are some individuals that will develop it without their tonsils. They'll be very inflamed. Their throat would be red and purulent. It'll just be an awful feeling for them, difficult to swallow, coughing. That is a strep infection. Strep and staph infections we can treat with antibiotics. A cold and the flu are viral. The only treatment that you have for them is time.
Which sometimes we're not very patient
And of course, you can use over-the-counter pain relievers to help either with a fever or just general discomfort. You can do that, and there's some other over-the-counter things. But some research studies do show that it takes individuals a little bit longer to get over the cold if they do use a lot of these over-the-counter products. It's best just to let it go. And in addition to that, there's people who are prone to sinus infections. And there's 2 things associated with that. One is that they may be individuals who literally blow their nose too hard. When we have inflamed sinuses and we blow our nose too hard, we force that mucus back up into the cavities, and then it creates a medium for infection. Whereas individuals who don't do that may be able to get away with some different types of treatments. And even people who do, I shouldn't say that, but some of the nasal steroids that are by prescription, those things can actually be taken and have been shown to treat individuals much more effectively than anything else, especially an antibiotic. And we have been seeing that as a trend, and the Journal of the American Medical Association has published that.
Well, let's talk about antibiotics and use and abuse. I think sometimes when people get an antibiotic, they think, well, I'm just gonna save some of it because if I get sick again, then I don't have to go to the doctor. Talk about that can be kind of a dangerous thing to do.
It is a very dangerous thing to do. What people have a tendency to do is they start to feel better, and as they feel better, they decide that it's no longer important to finish the prescription, and it is essential that they finish that prescription. Just because you're feeling a little bit better doesn't mean that you still don't have that bug.
Right.
So if you continue to take that, you establish quite a big defense against that bug, and hopefully you'll recover nicely from that. But people who save a little bit back, and I have to say that would be my mother, and of course other people do that. They start to feel better, they set it aside, and they're not quite over the infection. And what they're doing is really training that illness that they have to come back and hit them a little bit harder next time and a little bit harder after that. And what happens is they start to develop an antibiotic resistance, which is a major problem for us today. It is my personal and my professional feeling that antibiotics should be just as strictly regulated as narcotics.
Really?
Yeah.
And talk about antibiotic resistant. I know when MRSA came out, people were really, are still afraid of MRSA because it's so hard to treat. And is that because of antibiotic resistance?
It is in part because of antibiotic resistance, and MRSA actually stands for methicillin-resistant Staph aureus or Staphylococcus aureus. And what we have found is there are certain strains of staph infections that are resistant to specific antibiotics like methicillin. And we find that we try and treat it, and we don't get a lot of success for that. And the infection is contagious when it oozes. You have to keep it covered. It's painful to some people. It can not just be on the skin, but it can also appear internally. People can develop it systemically. Now, when it appears on the skin, it usually looks a little bit like a spider bite. And that's the same for a new antibiotic-resistant strain that we have called Versa, which is vancomycin-resistant Staph aureus. So now we have MRSA and we have Versa. A lot of people in the past have been afraid of those, actually picking them up in hospitals. Hospitals have done much better at managing those two strains. In fact, we've actually seen the numbers of infections go down in comparison to seeing them amongst the community. Most infections are community associated, not healthcare associated.
Right. Let's talk about if you take an antibiotic for something like the cold, are you doing some damage to yourself by doing that, or are you just doing nothing?
Well, it's actually a little bit of both.
Okay.
If you're hoping that you're going to get better and it's going to defeat the cold, you're out of luck. It's just simply not going to happen. You are, in a sense, doing a little bit of damage because you're taking a medication that you don't need. And again, one of the major things that happens with that is you teach, especially when you're taking it for bacterial infection, you're teaching that bacteria to become stronger. Now, using an antibiotic when you don't need one is slightly different. Antibiotics, when you don't need one, can actually kill the good bacteria in your body that keeps the bad bacteria in check. And that's the same thing that we see happening with many of the new hand sanitizers that develop.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about over-sanitizing, because we are kind of all into sanitizing, because we, you know, especially in the workplace, one person gets sick and then you start thinking about, oh, we share computers, we share this and that and all, and everyone wants to get out their disinfectant. Let's talk about sanitizing and over-sanitizing, pros and cons.
Well, the sanitizing is a good thing to do as long as it is alcohol-based.
Okay.
There's lots of alcohol-based brands that you can purchase. You'll find them essentially everywhere. Even at gas stations you can find them now. It's actually a pretty good product, but it should not be used in replacing hand washing. You should only use an alcohol-based sanitizer if soap and water are not available.
Okay.
Soap and water is still our best hand hygiene defense. On the other hand, sometimes we find individuals like the convenience of a hand sanitizer. I prefer they use soap and water, but if they're going to use a hand sanitizer that is alcohol-based, that's okay with me too. Again, my preference is the soap and water. I often get questions about that, about hand washing. Usually you wash your hands with warm soapy water for at least the length of singing your ABCs.
Which a lot of people don't.
Yeah, a lot of people don't. And you can also do it to singing a happy birthday song. That works as well. But we suggest that they wash their hands. Again, warm soapy water. Do that for at least 30 seconds and dry them thoroughly. If you're teaching children to actually wash their hands, which sometimes can be a challenge, I suggest dishwashing soap, because dishwashing detergent,
it's harder to get off.
That's precisely right. They start to wash their hands, it takes longer to rinse them off, and it forces them to keep their hands under the water longer. And if they don't, they'll find out very quickly the next time they eat something or put something in their mouth that they still have soap on their hands. So it's a great teaching tool. From my professional standpoint, one of the hand sanitizers that is used is a product called triclosan. And triclosan is actually, many people don't know this, a pesticide that has antimicrobial properties. So it has some antibacterial properties to it. For adults, that's not a problem. They can use those products. For children, we're starting to see some trends that it is actually causing some problems with their immune system, meaning that they just are becoming sick, they're becoming more antibiotic resistant because of this particular product being absorbed through their skin. And you can find it in child seats, in shoes, in toothpaste, toys. You can find it in virtually anything that says it's antibacterial.
Sure, sure. I was going to talk about, you and I grew up in an era where we probably drank out of garden hoses. And,
yes.
The 5-second rule. What about? Do you think kids today, because of now all these products that we weren't exposed to when we were kids, and even people older than us, do you think children today are becoming more antibiotic or resistant because everything is over-sanitized?
Well, it may be that the triclosan is playing a role in that, but you're right. As kids, I grew up on a farm, so we were into everything, absolutely everything. And we didn't really develop those types of sicknesses that we see children developing today. What we do see differently, though, is that we have a larger population of people now. We are seeing more illnesses simply because there's more people.
Right.
So that is a big factor. When we look at food safety, my mom will say, hey, we didn't have these problems when we were farming or anything. Well, we didn't have the number of consumers that we used to have. So food safety has changed. Antibiotic use is still in demand by consumers. Many feel that if they don't get an antibiotic from a physician, that person is a quack. And it simply is not true. They're just trying to prevent the abuse of antibiotics. We do see a lot of children, though, that are having problems with the antibiotics. Again, we relate that back to the triclosan. And it may also just be some really poor hygiene, which is a major, major factor.
Let's talk a little bit about how weather affects viruses and bacteria. The winter of 2012 has been very mild. Does a really cold winter bring out more of those diseases, or vice versa?
It's interesting that you ask that, because what we find with influenza in particular, for years and years, we believed that the reason why people got sick during the winter is because they were together all the time. That's not necessarily true. What we now know about influenza as a virus is that it prefers the cold.
Okay.
And since it prefers cold conditions, we're seeing more people becoming infected with that.
Okay.
Now, when you look at, say, a preschool, they're what I like to call a year-round petri dish. Those kids are, they're always sick. They give it to each other. It's poor hygiene. I would just once like to see some immunity sample or some blood samples from a preschool teacher. I imagine that they're just fantastic because they're sick all the time for their first year. But there certainly is, some different types of things that we're seeing with that. Now, back to the cold. Many people believe that cold temperatures will make you sick, and that simply is not true. I heard of a particular case last week in which a woman was going to go for a walk over her lunch period. She couldn't decide if she wanted to wear her coat or not because she didn't know if it was so cold or cold enough that she herself would develop a cold. And again, it's not possible. Cold and temperatures do not cause illness.
Okay.
What causes illness is viruses and bacteria, not temperatures.
Not temperature.
Yeah, it's very misleading. But part of that is a little bit of an old wives' tale, is that people have believed that for years, and it's difficult to get past those belief systems.
So what about the old wives' tale? Is it feed a cold, starve a fever, or vice versa? I can't remember.
I can't remember either, and I think of that often. Which one is it? If the person feels well enough to eat,
you should eat.
Go ahead and eat. Let's not starve them. And the same goes with exercise. If the person feels well enough to exercise, go ahead. If you have a fever, you probably shouldn't. But that's something to consider as well.
Okay. I saw something recently online, and it was directed at commuters and all the things that people who commute, maybe in larger cities than what we live in, all the things that they touch that are really germy.
They are germy.
And if you think about that too much, we'd never leave the house. But let's talk about some of the places in our everyday life, public places, that you can pick up a lot of germs.
Yeah.
What are some of the germiest?
Well, what you're talking about right now is the fomites. You know, we have airborne illnesses where we cough and someone else can inhale that. It has been recorded that when people sneeze, some people can sneeze up to 100 miles per hour.
Wow.
Which is just fascinating to me that could be done, and a little disgusting. But when you look at, again, the surfaces that people touch, probably doorknobs is one. And people think they get around that by pushing the handicap pad to get into, but everybody else is doing the same thing. Pharmacies, where you may have to sign for a prescription, remote controls.
In hotel rooms.
In hotel rooms. You know, your bathtub right at the base of the drain is a big place for that to happen. Toilet handles, toilet floors, sinks in which people do not really clean them. You know, so there's lots of different types of places. Essentially, anything that you touch that someone else touches can put you at risk. You know, computer labs on our campus. A lot of them have wipes for the computers. The key is, if you touch any one of these things, don't touch your face. Don't eat without washing your hands. Don't put your fingers in your ears or your nose or your mouth. That is what is going to cause the problems.
What about if you said ears, no, what, your eyes? So
certainly not your eyes. You know, people who wear contact lenses, and even people who don't, when they rub their eyes, they usually rub it with their hands, but you should wash your hands before you touch anything from the neck up. And you know, sometimes we'll see like pink eye outbreaks or conjunctivitis, which is really just an inflammation of the membrane of the eye. When that happens, it's highly contagious. People rub their eyes and they touch things. Other people touch things and they also rub their eyes. You know, rub your eye with the back of your hand. Sneeze or cough into the crook of your arm. Coughing into your hand or rubbing your eye with your hands and then touching things is not helping other people. And it's approximated that every minute we touch our face about 3 times. So if you think about how many minutes there are in a day and how many times you touch your face within that time frame, you do put yourself at higher risk to develop an illness.
Now we're all going to be thinking of it.
There is, but you know, if I can recommend one thing more than anything else, wash your hands. You know, 30, 40, 50 years ago, one of the things they taught in schools was hygiene. Before they started teaching health, which is really my field. And then we started looking at behaviors in my field and infections and a variety of other things. But hygiene, especially hand hygiene, is paramount. It has to be something that is practiced.
I think it's like we got about 3 minutes left. Is there some other areas that you'd like to talk about?
I think, to recap, the importance of finishing prescriptions for antibiotics, knowing ultimately that hand hygiene is the thing that matters. Only use gel sanitizers or hand sanitizers when there's no soap or water that's available. I see people using hand sanitizers in our building right outside our bathroom. Wash your hands, not use the hand sanitizers. But you know, part of that is also how our society is. We're kind of a quick fix society. We'd rather use something simple like a hand sanitizer than anything else. Avoid touching your face when you're sick, and certainly even when you're not sick, try and avoid doing that. Watch the surfaces that you touch, and really let's go back to days when my grandmother was around teaching us simple rules. You know, wash your hands before you eat.
Are there, not to scare everybody, but you know, we always hear, you know, usually in the late summer, early fall, you know, this is going to be a bad year for, you know, influenza. Are there emerging diseases out there that we should be aware of that are on the horizon?
Well, there's always emerging diseases, especially with the viruses and bacteria. And if I can put my money on anything in the end of who's going to win the battle, I'm putting my money on the bugs. You know, it will be them if it's not us. But we do see, especially with influenza, every year the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention puts out a list and then vaccinates for the 3 most common influenza strains that we'll see that year. What we do is they generally wait for a trend to start to appear. We get an idea of which ones to be vaccinated for, and that's what we vaccinate the public for. There are a large number of individuals that do not believe in vaccination. In fact, we have about a 50% vaccination culture, meaning 50% of individuals get vaccinated for influenza that really can be vaccinated for them. The influenza vaccine is made with eggs, hen eggs, and if you have an egg allergy, you cannot have it.
Right.
But you do get a lot of protection from that. Some people say, I haven't had the flu, I don't get sick. But it is quite possible that if you have an elderly person in your family, maybe a person who's getting chemotherapy because they're sick with cancer, or maybe they have another immune disease,
right,
you can expose them to influenza, right, even if you do not get sick.
Yeah.
I also hear, just very briefly, a lot of people who say that the influenza vaccine makes them sick.
Right.
It does not. It's not possible. It's kind of along the same line of thinking that cold makes you sick. It's kind of something that people have bought into over the years. When we look at influenza and people becoming ill with the vaccine, in the vaccine itself, the influenza virus is dead. And because of that, it cannot give it to someone else.
Okay.
So that is the one thing. The other thing is, once you get vaccinated, it takes about 2 weeks to develop immunity. So it is possible that you can get vaccinated, and before that 2 weeks is up, you could expose yourself and pick it up. That's exactly right.
Normally your shoulder hurts a little bit, but
yeah,
that's
and actually they're changing that. They're developing a shorter needle that doesn't go as deep into the shoulder, or the deltoid is where it's typically being given, and a finer needle. So that one is to be given to adults to avoid a lot of that shoulder discomfort. And of course we have the nasal vaccine that's for children only. It's not for adults.
Darn.
I know a lot of people want that, but it's not for adults.
Well, Sheila, thank you for coming on and giving us some good advice. And people follow that, they can have hopefully a year of fewer colds and flus.
Hopefully. Thanks so much.
Thank you.